Right, well, the technology is there, but what it says is this forum calls for the restructure of the red meat industry organisations with the abolition of unnecessary bodies, a revamped voting and board selection process, and a redefined focus on core functions such as market information, market access, and domestic beef promotion. That is what it is in its short form. There's 20-odd pages in there to explain it all, and that's up to Norm. Thank you.
Will someone, oh, John Burnett, will you come up, please? Will someone second that motion? Norman Hunt, thank you. Does anyone want to speak for or against it, or ask a question, or whatever?
Yeah, actually, I'd like to speak for it.
Thanks, Norman.
I hope everyone can hear that clearly. The current structure, industry organisation structure, as has been said, came around in the mid-90s because of the dissatisfaction with the previous structure, which had been the AMLC and MRC, which had been set up in the early 80s with a budget of 14 million. By the mid-90s, that had blown out to 96 million. Cattle prices had fallen by 20%, and domestic beef consumption had fallen by 1.7% a year. When the coalition came into power in the mid-90s, they set up a task force, Livestock Meat Industry Task Force, to look at reforming the industry. That task force came down and made some recommendations, and the recommendations included a beef-specific corporation and a sheep-specific corporation, and also expressed concerns about the previous disenfranchisement of the people involved in the industry from the AMLC and MRC. So they actually recommended industry representation on the board, a democratic function which would involve all the industry participants. And one of the things that I've heard here today and at Armidale and in my discussions with the whole of the industry is the reality is today the grassroots feel that they're disenfranchised. We have a peak council structure that goes through a convoluted grassroots industry organisation to regional to state. There's a five-fold separation before you actually get to the cattle council, and then again the cattle council have got and all the other peak councils have got special provisions in the MLA. And what's happened since that review? Well, cattle prices have still continued to fall, and the long-term trend decline in per capita beef consumption in Australia continues at exactly the same rate as it did before the MLA came into existence. So I think the simple reality is it's time for another review. The AMPC, I was actually involved quite heavily in that restructure in the mid-90s, particularly on behalf of processors. AMPC was hived off. In reality, and be very blunt about it, it's because prior to that time, processors had been paying over $50 million a year in levies under the old structures. When AMPC hived off, we got it down to 12 million. And, but why do we really have an AMPC? The money actually, which has now gone up to 18 million, goes around in a circle. It's taken by the processor off the producer, paid to the AMPC, 13 million of it goes back to the MLA, 5 million is spent in administrative costs, and as you heard Lee talk about, research and development funding to selected individuals in the industry. So why on earth do you have it? It's actually not an unnecessary function. People are talking about the Senate committee report in 2002. That report was very, very critical of the lack of democracy in the MLA board structure, and it was also critical of the functions of the Red Meat Advisory Council, which represents sheep meat council, cattle council, the lot feeders, livestock exporters, and the processors. Often their interests are in conflict. They each vote on each other's issues, and at best they come up with consensus decisions which are very rarely the right decisions. So there's a very real question as to the functionality and the need for the Red Meat Advisory Council. So I completely second the motion and believe it is time once again to bring about a restructure in the industry organisations which will are democratic and will allow the producers to be re-enfranchised with their industry body.
Thanks, Norman. Yeah.